One Piece chapter 1067. Now, there wasn't a lot of things in comparison to the last chapter, but we did have a lot of lore piece information in this chapter, especially information that we didn't know about. And also, it gives us more exposition on Vegapunk and his ideologies and where his mindset is currently at and how the clones work, because that's something that we've been speculating about, right? And for the most part, this chapter is more so building up the elements that Oda has set up in this arc, right? We're getting closer and closer to some sort of encounter with the CP0. How that encounter is going to go, we're not sure, because the Straw Hats are a legitimate powerhouse right now. So I don't know how Lucci is going to deal with this. But before we keep going, guys, I'd appreciate it if you dropped a like on this video. Let's go for 500 likes. Hit the bell if you want to get notified for future videos, and subscribe if you are new here. Now, Vegapunk. Now here we get a lot of details as to why Vegapunk's head is like that and why it was like that in the past. And here we come to find out that he actually has a devil fruit ability, the brain fruit. And it's pretty much an ability that allows him to store an unlimited amount of information in his head, right? In this case, he wouldn't be able to forget the knowledge that he's obtained. And this is how he was able to store everything that he got from the books that Soul took to Elbaf, right? So apart from being a genius, he also has this ability to store information, which is broken when you think about it, because he can store any and all information in that brain of his. Now, it does also come with the drawback that his brain gets bigger as his head contains more information, which makes a lot of sense. Initially, I thought that he was able to split the knowledge between the other 6 clones so that the burden on him wouldn't be as great. But here we come to find out that the top of the island where the egg is essentially his brain, and that's where all his information is stored. And he's essentially able to access it because of the antenna on top of his head. So this was essentially a way for him not to have that huge head roaming around everywhere, right? And I feel like this is a way for Oda not to draw that crazy head every time that he draws Vegapunk, because I couldn't imagine him like doing that every single time. He does also mention that the clones are one part of his whole identity, and each specializing in a specific area of science, again, which is something that we already kind of guessed based on the titles that they had. And the reason that all of them work in tandem so well is because once a day, all of them synchronize their memories and knowledge to Vegapunk's database, in which they are able to collect information and essentially synchronize as essentially one person. And again, this would explain why Shaka was able to recount Vegapunk's experience during the events of Ahara and when he met Dragon, because all of these Vegapunks have the original Vegapunk's memories as well as his knowledge. And that is a very smart thing to do, because by doing this, he's essentially sparking some form of innovation, because what Shaka creates will be different from Lilith. So they're combining everything into one seamless structure. So if one of them learns something, the other 6 also learn something, and they can apply it to their own field of study. And that's definitely one of the smartest ways to get around creating new things that you weren't able to create before. So yeah, Vegapunk is definitely on another level. And he does also mention something here that somewhat breaks the fourth wall here, in which he talks about humanity having access to his knowledge, because his brain is essentially a database at this point, right? Because people can connect to it, as well as people having the ability to put informations themselves into the database. And at that point, everyone would have a shared knowledge, or I guess have access to knowledge that other people have. And this would essentially stop people from searching for things, because the knowledge on these records is what they would need. Now, it does also come with the downside that people may also share ideas or wrong information into these databases, and that could lead to all sorts of trouble. But then Vegapunk responds by saying that you would never make progress if you spend time worrying about these things. And we've talked about this on several streams in which we talk about the potential of science and how dangerous it could be in the One Piece world. And even here, Bonnie states that Vegapunk's problem is that he shrugs off the sacrifices in the name of progress. And because of that, it can lead to all sorts of problems. And an example here would be Kuma. But again, we don't necessarily know the entire story to Kuma and how that came to be, because I think Vegapunk is a person of good intentions. Apart from just being curious, I feel like he wants to use science for humanity, and that database is proof of this, right? He wants people to have access to knowledge that he's obtained. So this isn't something that he wants just for himself, right? We're seeing that he's taking other people's well-being into account as well, even though his methods may come out as evil, or it may take evil to get to the point where he needs results. And again, I see both sides, right, to the argument. But earlier I mentioned that Oda is sort of breaking the fourth wall here, and that is because the database that Vegapunk is trying to create is essentially the internet. And I think this is eventually going to come to fruition eventually by the end of the story, in which people would have access to this database in which people can get all of this information that other people have accumulated. Now, can this lead to misuse? Obviously, but I think it has a more positive effect than a negative one, especially in the world of the One Piece, in which information is hard to get by because of the world government, restricting your access and withholding all that information away from you. So the internet is definitely going to be a part of One Piece moving forward, or at least towards the end of the story, right? Or whenever Vegapunk can implement this on a worldwide scale, right? And again, this might be a technology that the ancient kingdom had. Now, we'd also learned something about Momonosuke's devil fruit, and we get confirmation as to what that was, right? And here Vegapunk explains that recreate Kaido's devil fruit, but he says that it's defective. Now, at that point in the story, we didn't really know why it was defective, but we were sort of speculating that something may be wrong with it. But here we come to find out that the reason it's defective was because the color was pink, even though the devil fruit worked exactly like Kaido's. And so this is essentially telling us that Vegapunk is a perfectionist, where he wants everything to be the way that he envisions it, and even if it has the most minute error, it's considered a failure. And in this case, just because the dragon was pink, he considered that to be a failure, even though it could do everything that Kaido's fruit was doing, for the most part anyways. So essentially this confirms that Vegapunk can recreate devil fruit abilities, and we kind of saw that with the Jinbei Pacifista, in which he's able to use Senior Pink's devil fruit. So it seems like Vegapunk has mastered the way to recreate devil fruits. It's just that it takes a lot of resources to actually make one. So it's not a viable experiment that he can keep doing over and over again, just because of the amount of resources that is needed to make one. Now, moving forward, we get more details as to this robot that was created 900 years ago. Now, I'm starting to think that this was the machine that Shaka was saying that was excavated, because here we come to learn that this Iron Giant was seemingly responsible for an attack on Marijois about 200 years ago. Even though it was built over 900 years ago, it still had energy to move around 700 years later. And apparently its purpose was unknown, because when it came to Marijois, the energy ran out before it could do anything. And so the scientists of that time period were interested in it, and so they stored it somewhere else away from the world government in order to study it, because this was something with some sort of unlimited power source, which is interesting because Lilith talked about some sort of undying flame in the last chapter, in which they talk about a power source with no limits, and it would seem that the ancient kingdom had this power source. And they also stated that about 200 years ago was the time that the Fishman rights movement was happening. So it would seem that those two things were connected, right? Which is very interesting, because this is more so very recent in comparison to the time of the Void Century. So we're getting more information about the relics that the ancient kingdom created. Now, moving forward, we do see CP0 arrive at Egghead Island, and it seems like they want to dock their ships. Of course, Shaka responds by saying no, that they should leave the Seraphim to just leave. So it would seem that some sort of scuffle will take place, right? Now, as of right now, I don't see how CP0 stands a chance against the Straw Hats. Obviously, they don't know the Straw Hats are here, so they're going to come to a rude awakening once they find out that Yonko is here, right? So I wonder how that encounter is going to take place. Now, obviously, I know Rob Lucci is a lot stronger than he was, pre-time skip, and Oda is probably going to scale him a lot higher now, but I don't think he's messing with Luffy right now. If anything, I think the maximum that he can go to, or at least I think where he should be at, is probably around Zoro Sanji level, around that, because Luffy is a different monster right now. So we'll see how that plays out. And finally, at the end of the chapter, we come to see Kuma, and apparently something strange seems to be happening to him, in which he seems to be going somewhere. Now, it could be one of two things, whereas he's still programmed to protect someone, or has some sort of mission that he needs to accomplish, or he could be potentially trying to go to Egghead Island. Maybe because Bonnie is there. But again, it doesn't seem like he's sane in mind yet, so there's obviously something going on here. But again, we'll see how it plays out. But overall, this was a decent chapter. I feel like we got a lot of exposition as to who Vegapunk is, and his ideology, as well as how the clones work, and his future intent on what he wants to create for the future, aka the internet. So again, I feel like we got a decent amount in this chapter. And again, it seems like Oda is building things up, right, with the CP0 and Vegapunk seemingly wanting to leave the island. So definitely some interesting developments here. But that is pretty much it for this video, guys. I'd appreciate it if you dropped a like on this video. Comment down below what you guys think. Subscribe if you're new here. Hit the bell if you want to get notified for future content. You can follow me on Twitter at Ferrospace. But it is Farrah, guys, and I will see you folks later. Peace.